Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Walton. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is, or we will pretend it is, Monday, December 24th, 2018. That makes it, the date 24th, of course, makes it Christmas Eve. But I always, does anybody even know, what do you say on the morning of Christmas Eve? Eve being evening, of course. Is it still Christmas Eve in the morning? I don't know. This is probably the least of your problems. Donald Trump, still president of the United States. There you go, just to put things in perspective for you. And the government over which he presides, presumably, since I'm recording this early, still shut down. The Congress, let's say, unlikely to have returned and opened the place up. And I don't think they're even due back until Thursday at the earliest. So this could be a little bit of a lengthy shutdown. President insisting, of course, he won't budge. Democrats, I think, for the most part, doing the same. The numbers varying a little bit. I have seen, of course, the president was demanding something in the order of $5 billion for his wall. And then I saw somebody float, I think anonymously, because everything's done anonymously, floating, he shouldn't cave for less than $1.5 billion. And then later on in the same afternoon, he shouldn't cave for less than 2 point something billion. So I don't know what's going on, but I know it sucks. We're shut down. And as others have pointed out over the weekend, and you likely saw it too, this is it's the third shutdown in Trump's 2 years, during all of which, of course, the entirety of the relevant branches of government were in Republican hands. Pretty interesting. Doesn't usually happen that way. And believe it or not, Joe Scarborough actually made a good point. And I was forced to acknowledge it, and I was stunned that I had to acknowledge a good point having been made by him. But it's true, and it's that this is the first time, at least that I've ever seen, I think he's right. How did he say it in his tweet? Conservatives used to fight over government shutdowns to push for less spending and less debt. Now, Trump Republicans have shut down the federal government to pay for a $5 billion political punchline. Real conservatives would just say no to Trump's boondoggle. Interesting. He hashtags it debt bomb, but that's something that's so Republican sounding. I've never seen debt bomb before. He may be the only person using it. I'm curious whether there's anything else besides his tweet using debt bomb. I don't think so. Well, I can go and look, actually. Might as well call it up here on Twitter and see. Does anybody use this thing? Yeah, I mean, I guess they do. I have no idea who those people are or why they would do something like that. But okay, if you think it's catchy, go for it. Whatever. Anyway, that was actually a good point. I don't know that I have ever seen, because it's probably never happened, Republicans shutting down the government in demand of more spending. Well, things have been stood on their heads, have they not? Okay, well, that's not what I came here to talk to you about, of course. I didn't come here at all. This is pre-recorded. But I didn't want to leave you hanging on the 24th, at whatever time you're listening, for whatever reason you're listening. Maybe you're home preparing for the Christmas holidays. Maybe you have no interest whatsoever in the Christmas holiday, but you're off from work, or you've been furloughed because you're a government employee. Well, these things happen. I wanted to come back, though, and jump on something that required a little bit of clarification that we threw out on Friday, and that was that there was the possibility that Matt Whitaker, because he has no interest in, administering the Justice Department according to the rule of law or the rule of anything else for that matter, that he might, in his capacity as fake acting attorney general, decide to designate the special counsel's office, or at least Robert Mueller's personnel working under that umbrella, as non-essential employees, and therefore furloughed during the government shutdown. And it's not entirely clear that he can do that, but I'm operating under the assumption that YOLO, LOL, YOLO, nothing matters. He doesn't care whether you can or you can't. It would be something that he would just claim to be able to do anyway, and would be perfectly happy to fight about it in court. Who really even cares if you lose, especially if he could somehow get the Treasury to agree and delay paying the personnel in the special counsel's office for long enough to be an annoyance, and then lose in court, and okay, we'll pay up. But no skin off my nose, we were going to pay you anyway. That sort of thing. I'm not certain whether or not he could get other people to agree. I'm not certain that he agrees with the idea, and I guess I don't want to give him the idea, but he's not listening to the show, so I think we're pretty safe in that. But, he'd have to get agreement, I guess, from the Treasury, although I suppose if he were to hand over paperwork or, say, tweet out, whatever you have to do under this administration, to the Treasury, I don't know that Treasury officials would be in a position to deny his judgment on its face and simply issue the checks. They may be put in a bad spot, and they may have to say, I don't know if this is entirely right and proper. I don't know if it's legal, but I do have what purports to be an order from the person who purports to be the acting attorney general, and I have to give that some credence. Well, there's a real body of law behind it, and probably if you were following the issue during the closing hours of Friday, this wasn't even closing hours, this was a little bit after our broadcast, as a matter of fact, David Korn tweeting out, in case you're wondering, if a government shutdown will affect Robert Mueller's investigation, a spokesperson for the special counsel's office tells me the SCO, special counsel's office, is funded from a permanent indefinite appropriation and would be unaffected in the event of a shutdown. Now, that would appear to be an open and shut case, except for the fact that, one, you never know with anything anymore. LOL, YOLO, nothing matters. And two, of course, that sounds like the sort of thing that you're going to want to spend some time digging a little further and deeper into. A permanent indefinite appropriation, what's that? Well, it turns out, of course, we've been here before, and I guess in preparation for it, when we last worried about a shutdown, not the previous shutdown, but the last time we were worrying about this shutdown, and they kicked the can down the road a little bit, CNN picked up on the issue. That would be Wednesday, November 28th, that they wrote on this one. Laura Jarrett and Devin Cole for CNN. Mueller's office would continue working in the event of a government shutdown. So that's two sources that tell us that. Special counsel Robert Mueller's office would still be able to continue working if the federal government shuts down next week as a result of lawmakers' inability to produce a spending package before funding expires for several government agencies. That's how we got here. Mueller's office is, quote, funded from a permanent indefinite appropriation and would be unaffected in the event of a shutdown, a Justice Department spokesperson told CNN on Wednesday. That's, of course, the same thing, virtually the same thing anyway, almost verbatim, as the spokesperson for here identified as the spokesperson for the special counsel's office, according to David Korn. What struck me immediately in reading the CNN one was it was attributed to a Justice Department spokesperson, and not specifically a special counsel's office spokesperson. And the first thing I thought was, well, unaffected in the event of a shutdown, I am not certain that that is the case because you are a Trumpster. And here is how you read such a comment from a Trumpster, that it is not funded from a permanent indefinite appropriation and would be affected in the event of a shutdown. So I guess first I guess the question is, does the how to read a Trumpster comment rule apply to a Justice Department spokesperson if that person is actually, though they work for the Department of Justice, a special counsel's office spokesperson? I don't know. I'm not certain how to regard that. But it seems to have a basis in fact, and so, you could let it lie, right? But we're not sure because, LOL, YOLO, nothing matters. Mueller's office, the CNN article continues, is funded from a permanent indefinite appropriation, would be unaffected in the event of a shutdown. The appropriation bills before Congress do not touch the special counsel's office. That's true, but it's also extraneous to the point, and it's weird that you would throw that in if you've already made clear that there's a permanent indefinite appropriation that would be unaffected in the event of a shutdown. It's odd to throw in there the verifiable fact that the appropriations bills before Congress don't touch the special counsel's office, without clarifying that. Yeah, but, where does this special appropriation, where does this permanent indefinite appropriation come from? Again, luckily we have some answers, but hold on. Should no deal be reached by December 7th, remember this is the first time around, funding for several agencies, including the Department of Homeland Security, will expire. Concerns about the continuity of Mueller's investigation, which is investigating, as you know, thank you for telling us though, CNN, Russian interference in the 2016 presidential election and whether anyone from President Donald Trump's campaign was involved, were also raised earlier this year when an eventual shutdown loomed in January. So we've been through this. At the time, a Justice Department spokesperson confirmed to CNN that employees in the office are considered exempt from furlough and, quote, would continue their operations in the case of a lapse in appropriations, unquote. Except there's no such thing as a lapse in appropriations if you are working off of a supposedly so-called permanent indefinite appropriation. So a lot of this is probably attributable to the weirdness of a permanent indefinite appropriation and the fact that we don't have any special words for appropriations, and it's a very weird area of law. And of course, there's always the LOL, YOLO, nothing matters factor, in which you could argue that either you could just simply say, well, to hell with it, prove to me that really works, or two, we're just babbling and saying whatever we need to say in order to get out of trouble, and then reality strikes and gosh, we thought we were right, but we aren't. So what's going on here is the question. Well, first of all, what the hell is a permanent indefinite appropriation? And second of all, where does it come from? Well, okay, so it turns out that there is such a thing, but there's a problem with it. And the problem with it is pointed out, a potential problem with it. And the problem is addressed by various parts of the government, and it's addressed for some time. It's been addressed for some time. It's actually, going on about 14 years old, the authority that they're relying on here. But there's issues. And at this point, I want to turn to a terrible source. I'm warning you up front. It's the worst. It's from the Federalist, and they are frequently very, very wrong about matters of law, and they're frequently very, very arrogant about it. And, I guess that happens here too. We're not that frequently wrong. As a matter of fact, when I run into the Federalist, it's usually when I have made some weird esoteric point of what I think the law says, and they disagree vehemently, and then they get very insulting about it, and they're very arrogant about that. But anyway, I turn to them for a specific reason, not because I think they're right, but because I think this is where the next disingenuous argument about Mueller's office and its funding will come from. This is the sort of thing that idiots like Matt Whitaker rely on and say are genuine good faith analyses of the law. The other problem is that I hate the agency that came up with the explanation. Not in general, but in particular, that is, I guess I really should say, I hate them currently. And when you find out who it is, I think listeners to the show who are familiar with our thinking here will figure out why. All right, first, let's just get to the garbage. Sean Ross Callahan is the garbage man here, delivering this particular garbage for the Federalist. Robert Mueller spent $4.5 million on Russiagate without a congressional appropriation, he claims, or did claim anyway, in June of 2018, June 12th to be specific. And he subtitles this piece, "Whether for a new park in a powerful congressman's home district or for a special counsel, the country's checks mustn't clear unless Congress actually says they should." Now, there is an issue with that. Congress has said they should. They actually have made this permanent, indefinite appropriation. And I won't spoil the surprise by telling you exactly where or in what fashion before I give you this bad faith argument. Is it actually, it's not the worst, let's say. It's not the worst of the garbage that they've brought us, but generally speaking, it's still garbage for a very specific reason, which has been undermined in recent months. So here we go. "Perhaps it's a sign of the times," he begins, "but many citizens don't pay much attention to how the government keeps taxpayers' checks from bouncing. The Constitution does, however. Congress, and only Congress, holds the power of the purse. We might wonder, then, how Special Counsel Robert Mueller spends money. Congress has not specifically appropriated money to fund Mueller's investigations and prosecutions. How, then, do Mueller's checks clear? Recently, back in June, Mueller provided a little-noticed answer that raises serious legal and constitutional concerns for Sean Ross Callahan. Late last month, that would have been in May of 2018, Mueller released a spending report. The report lays out the legal authority that Mueller claims to spend money. Mueller claims his spending is principally authorized by the Permanent Indefinite Appropriation for Independent Counsels. Mueller claims that the Department of Justice has determined that this appropriation is legally available to fund his investigation. Mueller cites a 2004 Government Accountability Office opinion, that's the GAO, that this appropriation was legally available to fund special counsels. Now, maybe that rang a bell for you. The GAO. I am not in love with the GAO. We have not fallen in love. We're not writing beautiful love letters to one another at this point. The GAO is, of course, the office that completely inexplicably decided once Donald Trump was in office that it was going to interpret the clauses of the lease of the old post office building, which is the building that was renovated and turned into the Trump International Hotel in Washington, D.C., that prohibits ownership of the hotel by government employees, or to whatever the building gets turned into. The ownership of it was prohibited for government employees. And it was pretty obvious that that was going to cause a problem, by most accounts, for Donald Trump. And the GAO, took its time in doing it, but eventually decided the president is not a government employee for the purposes of this lease, which is inexplicable. And even if you somehow swallow the idea that, well, he's not a regular government employee, he's different from other kinds of employees, maybe. I mean, people have made that argument in other contexts before. But Ivanka Trump is a part owner of the hotel. And surely, if she's not the president, as far as I know, maybe you could make the argument somehow that she's not a regular government employee. But they didn't bother making it. The GAO just said the plain language of this lease is just not operative here. We don't know why. It just isn't. So the GAO isn't in solid hands at this point. Granted, this was written back in 2004 when they presumably were better. I'm just saying that if you have people in place right now at the GAO who are willing to turn everything on its head for the benefit of Donald Trump, then I guess if you were to take this Sean Ross Callahan argument, hand it to Matt Whitaker, and go to the GAO with it, I don't know. I don't know whether it's a 50-50 shot, or maybe you're 100% guaranteed because they're all crazy there now, or maybe LOL, YOLO, nothing matters. I have no idea what the driving motivation could be, but I guess there's some chance that the GAO might say, that 2004 opinion is not operative. Or we have a different opinion. It's operative, but for this, we think it's different. And on what might they hinge that? Here's the thing. Nothing. They might hinge it on nothing. But, like I said, this wasn't the worst garbage in the world. Sean Ross Callahan offers them something to hang this on, and that's a little bit worrying. Here's the deal. The permanent and indefinite appropriation is important to Mueller's investigations and prosecutions, which is how the article continues. According to Mueller's report, from October 1st, 2017 through March 31st, 2018, this appropriation accounted for $4,506,624 of Mueller's spending. That's about half of all Mueller's spending during that time, and all the spending during that time on salaries and benefits. The remainder of Mueller's spending is unreimbursed expenses incurred by other DOJ components, essentially money siphoned from other investigations. That's how he puts it. Mueller claims the authority for his spending is codified in statutory notes to Section 591 of Title 28 of the United States Code. These notes do state that Congress established a permanent indefinite appropriation within the Department of Justice to pay all necessary expenses of investigations and prosecutions by independent counsel appointed pursuant to the provisions of 28 U.S. Code 591 et sec. Or other law. The notes state that Congress did so in Title II of Public Law 100-202, dated December 22nd, 1987, and sure enough, Congress did. I don't know why he provides both citations there, but there it is. Both in the U.S. Code and under the PL public law number. Interesting, and I don't know if you see what's coming just yet, but anyway, at least he acknowledges that that did happen, and Congress did establish this permanent indefinite appropriation, and well, it's odd. But I guess they did, and you understand the reason why they did it. It might not be immediately obvious, but remember, we're talking about, well, we're talking about controversial investigations, sometimes some of which might involve the President of the United States or members of Congress or other high-ranking officials who might presumably be able to prevail upon someone to defund an investigation, to protect them for whatever reason. They might actually do that. And in order to guarantee the integrity and independence of these investigations, they can't be subject to funding fights or government shutdowns for that matter, right? So it must be it makes sense for the Congress in 1987 to establish this thing, as weird an animal as it is, a permanent indefinite appropriation. It's out there, and you can understand why they would do it. So what's the question if that's not it? He gets to it next. Does the permanent and indefinite appropriation for independent counsels, and he's stressing that here, independent counsels. Think back to the time here. We're talking about 1987, when there was still an independent counsel law on the books. Ken Starr, etc. It wasn't him in 1987, but that was the last of the independent counsels. You remember that law lapsed after the Ken Starr debacle, and we now use special counsels, which are they mostly perform the same functions, but they do so under slightly different authority. And what's the problem here? Does the permanent and indefinite appropriation for independent counsels apply to special counsels? Well, the word is different, and you know how they are about similar words. Nazis are leftists because National Socialism, right? So you can see where this would be a bug up their posteriors, let's say. I don't know why we don't just say the word. Anyway, here's the next section. This is about what GAO actually thinks about this. Mueller cites the GAO opinion as agreeing with the DOJ that this appropriation was legally available to fund special counsels. The opinion concerns the appointment, this is the GAO letter, appointment in December of 2003 of Patrick Fitzgerald. You remember Patrick Fitzgerald? Then a Senate-confirmed U.S. attorney as special counsel by none other than then Deputy Attorney General and Acting Attorney General at the time, as a matter of fact, James Comey. How interesting is that? Fitzgerald, you may recall, investigated who revealed the identity of undercover CIA officer Valerie Plame. As noted above, the permanent and indefinite appropriation is available to fund the investigations and prosecutions by independent counsel appointed pursuant to the provisions of 28 U.S. Code 591 et sec. Or other law. Now, the big question is, what does our other law mean? because the independent counsel law has expired. The GAO focused in their memo on the other law prong of the appropriation because Section 591 et sec of Title 28 of the U.S. Code, that is to say the independent counsel law, lapsed in 1999. Yeah. The term independent counsel is not defined, Sean tells us, in the permanent indefinite appropriation. The GAO noted in the beginning of its analysis, and it is a long and dry analysis, I assure you. So, the GAO considered whether Fitzgerald was an independent counsel appointed pursuant to other law. To decide, the GAO, quote, looked for indicia of the special counsel's independence. In this regard, the GAO looked for Fitzgerald's de jure independence. Independence expressly granted by law. Under the GAO's reasoning, an independent counsel appointed pursuant to other law who is entitled to the permanent and indefinite appropriation enjoys the de jure independence that independent counsels appointed under the lapsed independent counsel law generally did. Under a provision of the lapsed independent counsel law, independent counsels enjoyed the independent authority to exercise all investigative and prosecutorial functions and powers of the Attorney General. That makes sense. The permanent and indefinite appropriation was originally for independent counsels. As the GAO explained in its opinion, when Congress considered the permanent and indefinite appropriation in 1987, because of legal challenges underway regarding the constitutionality of the procedure followed to appoint independent counsels, presumably the famed Morrison v. Olson case at the Supreme Court decided the following year, the independent counsels appointed under other law around that time were the independent counsels that also had been appointed in conformity with the requirements of the independent counsel law. Hi everybody, it's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Let's continue with the horrible piece put together by the Federalist, because all pieces put together by the Federalist are horrible, and we are offering it not for the truth of the matter asserted, but for its horribleness, I guess, just to borrow from the Federal Rules of Evidence on that one, where we left off here, explaining that, or the process under which independent counsels were originally appointed, and the special consideration that they were given under the appropriations law, a permanent, indefinite appropriations laid out for them in law in 1987. And let's see, shall we recap? I guess you would have had that last sentence before you. So we'll continue on with this piece here. And start here. I'm losing my place here. Put differently, the same independent counsels back in 1987 were being appointed under dual authority to ensure that their investigations would continue should Morrison v. Olson strike down the appointment procedure in the independent counsel law. In looking for indicia of independence for Fitzgerald back in 2003, 2004, the GAO concluded that the Department of Justice, in appointing special counsel Fitzgerald, has afforded him independence by delegating all of the Attorney General's authority with respect to an investigation and instructing him to exercise that authority independent of the control of any officer of the department. And he has gone ahead and italicized those words for you. The GAO further concluded that to the extent they limited Fitzgerald's independence, regulations in Part 600 of Title 28 of the Code of Federal Regulations were waived. The GAO noted, in February 2004, Acting Attorney General Comey clarified Special Counsel Fitzgerald's delegation of authority to state that the authority previously delegated to him is plenary, and that the title of Special Counsel in this matter should not be misunderstood to suggest that his position and authorities were defined and limited by 28 Code of Federal Regulations Part 600. Interesting, right? Well, here's the argument. Not so with Mueller. And he continues under a section entitled, Let's Apply That GAO Opinion to Mueller. Mueller's independence as a de jure matter is clearly defined and limited by Part 600 of Title 28 of the Code of Federal Regulations. This means Mueller lacks the indicia of independence the GAO required in 2004 to fit Fitzgerald into Congress's permanent and indefinite appropriation. The public order appointing Mueller, who, unlike Fitzgerald at the time of his appointment, is not currently a Senate-confirmed officer, states that sections 600.4 through 600.10, they do number those things that way. It's kind of weird if you're not familiar with it, but 600.4 through 600.10 of Title 28 of the Code of Federal Regulations are applicable to the special counsel. These sections limit Mueller's de jure independence, subjecting him to the supervision of Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, the acting Attorney General in charge of Mueller's investigation, to the extent that Attorney General Jeff Sessions is recused. And, of course, he's now gone. And we deal with, possibly, Matt Whitaker, maybe not, who knows. In particular, Section 600.7b states that Rosenstein, quote, may request that the special counsel provide an explanation for any investigative or prosecutorial step, and may, after review, conclude that the action is so inappropriate or unwarranted under established departmental practices that it should not be pursued. In de jure independence, Mueller is no Fitzgerald and certainly no independent counsel. At bottom, Mueller is relying on a broad interpretation of a 3-decade-old appropriation for an independent counsel that, with the lapse of the independent counsel law, does not really exist anymore. Here, ignoring the or other law idea. Now, here's the DOJ's choice, as Sean sees it. We'll see if it's right. To strengthen Mueller's claim to the permanent and indefinite appropriation, the DOJ could grant Mueller greater de jure independence, but not so fast. The Appointments Clause of the Constitution requires that principal officers of the executive branch be appointed by the President and confirmed by the Senate. Mueller wasn't. Yet, he wasn't. We know he wasn't. But what about, I guess if they're sitting here claiming unitary executive theory, if he was appointed by Trump's Department of Justice, the unitary executive theory is stupid on its face, but that's their preferred theory. Why is the president not deemed essentially to have made and approved of that appointment just because he wasn't asked? It is kind of weird, but so is the unitary executive authority. Well, I wonder how those two would clash. All right, so Mueller wasn't, yet to be exempt from that constitutionally mandated appointments procedure, the Supreme Court holds that an appointed officer must have a boss. That is, the officer must be, quote, directed and supervised at some level by others who were appointed by presidential nomination with the advice and consent of the Senate. That, according to Edmund versus United States, a 1997 case, if the DOJ grants Mueller de jure independence from any such boss, then Mueller is a principal officer, and his appointment therefore violates the Appointments Clause of the Constitution. Alternatively, the DOJ could seek another congressional appropriation to replace Mueller's spending from the permanent and indefinite appropriation, but Congress is unlikely to agree to such new appropriation with a veto-proof margin. Conceivably, perhaps, the DOJ could replace Mueller with a Senate-confirmed officer and grant his replacement greater de jure independence. It is unclear, however, whether the DOJ would take such a step now. As to his authority to be appointed and to spend money, Mueller is under a political legal whipsaw. Of course, similar arguments have been made in order to object to his appointment at all, and have been rather soundly defeated in court to date. Interesting theory, though. Congress has a choice to make. That's the next section. Congress has a constitutionally mandated role in appropriating money. Under the constitutional non-delegation doctrine, Congress cannot wholly delegate its legislative functions to an executive branch agency. That's another branch of argument here. If independent counsel appointed pursuant to other law were interpreted as whomever an executive branch officer whenever designates, whomever an executive branch officer whenever designates for whatever purpose, surely non-delegation concerns would arise. That seems awkwardly written to me. This is ironic, as one would think that the last thing Congress would seek to delegate is its power to spend. But whether for a new park in a powerful congressman's home district or for a special counsel, this was his subheader, right? The country's checks mustn't clear unless Congress actually says they should. Checks and balances and all that. Well, we'll see. That's actually kind of a weak ending, I think. The last thing Congress would seek to delegate is its power to spend, but that's explicitly what they did because they knew they were dealing with an independent counsel statute or other law, I guess, and knew that there was a great possibility that such a counsel might investigate a powerful congressman or Speaker of the House or something like that. And they wanted to take it out of the hands of any of the political branches to appropriate for an as yet unenvisioned independent counsel or other type of counsel as appointed under other law. So who is Sean Ross Callahan? It says at the bottom. We'll find out here in those little italic types. Sean Ross Callahan is an attorney, really, and a former law clerk. Wow, for a U.S. District Court judge. Okay, not as impressive as say Supreme Court or Circuit Court. He served in the Treasury Department, the Justice Department, and in the D.C. Attorney General's office as an assistant attorney general. And well, I mean, he knows the terminology. He makes an argument. He's making an argument. He's in court. He's making an argument. Is it a good one? Doesn't matter for our purposes. Is it one that gets Matt Whitaker, who's masquerading as the acting attorney general, does it get him where he wants to go? And does he want to win? Does he want to delay things? Does he want to cause trouble? Does he want to make a spectacular fight to distract from something else? All of these things are possible. And all you need, well, I mean, you could just file papers that say he can't have the appropriation because I say so, and that would take less time to dismiss. This one might tie things in knots for a little while. It's not completely without basis, and it would make for an interesting argument to say, hey, this was really designed for an independent counsel. And I understand that the GAO, among other parts of the government, have bent over backwards to try to find reasons for, or to create the ability of counsel other than independent counsels, special counsels, like we have now, to be able to access that appropriation, because it seems in keeping with the point of the appropriation as conceived of in 1987. And so it's an easy thing to see how they would want to be able to access it. And they make a pretty good argument that a branch of other law and say, looking at, well, is the special counsel meant to be more or less independent in the same way that the independent counsel was? And it's pretty damn close, but it's not exactly the same, that's for sure. And the independent counsel law having expired, it gives you an entree into court anyway, to say, the wording on its face of the statute here says independent counsel or other law, I guess, and you'd have to concede that. But I mean, you could absolutely get there and say, well, the other law that we're talking about doesn't really afford a special counsel as much independence as the independent counsels were given. And despite the fact that the GAO in 2004 said, well, in our opinion, it really does, that's no barrier, not in this administration. Just get the GAO, which after all recently said that the emoluments clause doesn't mean what it means, and that the contract under which the old post office building was leased to Donald Trump doesn't mean what it means. So how hard would it be to get them to say that, well, I don't care what the GAO said in 2004. We could either reverse it or just ignore that whole thing and say, in our opinion, this means something completely different now. Forget what happened in 2004. It's not actually absolutely necessary that they withdraw that memo, but that would be the most complete way of dealing with it. Will they do it? I don't know. Who could say? So I'm not so sure. I think that's worth keeping an eye on, and hopefully Matt Whitaker will never hear this podcast. See what you can do to make sure that stays true. So meanwhile, if you want a glimpse of what kind of person is going to be making these decisions, or could potentially be making these decisions, besides the GAO, which you already have a look inside, you've got Matt Whitaker. And we've already had a look inside his background too, but let's update that in terms of the sorts of decisions he's making when he's required to make decisions based on existing law and regulation and Justice Department rules. I've got here Marty Lederman's December 21st entry over at justsecurity.org entitled, "What's Noticeably Missing from the Whitaker Non-Recusal Explanation?" This is also, deep in the weeds sort of thing. And what better time, really, for an entire show dedicated to getting deep in the weeds of the Code of Federal Regulations with regard to the appointment of Justice Department officials than Christmas Eve? I don't know, but it's not evening, so I guess it doesn't matter. The Department of Justice, Marty begins, issued a letter yesterday explaining why Matthew Whitaker has decided he won't recuse from superintending the Russia investigation overseen by Special Counsel Robert Mueller. This notwithstanding the many inaccurate and inflammatory public statements he made about the Mueller investigation in 2017 before he was hired to work in the Trump administration, which is, of course, how he got hired to work in the Trump administration. But that's not actually in Marty's article here, but we all know that to be the case, and so does he. The regulatory provisions at issue are 5 CFR sections 2365.502A2 and D. That is all of the foregoing plus the D at the end. I don't want to have to read that whole thing over again. The former, A2, provides that an employee concerned that circumstances other than those specified in the regulation would raise a question regarding his impartiality should use the process described in subsection D to determine whether he should or should not participate in a particular matter. Does that make sense to everybody? 5 CFR 2635502A2 says an employee concerned that circumstances other than those specified in that regulation would raise a question regarding his impartiality. And if that is a question, use the process in subsection D to figure out whether you should recuse for other reasons. Subsection D, in turn, provides that where an employee's participation in a particular matter involving specific parties would not violate 18 U.S. Code 208A, but would raise a question in the mind of a reasonable person about his impartiality, the agency designee may authorize the employee to participate in the matter based on a determination made in light of all relevant circumstances that the interest of the government in the employee's participation outweighs the concern that a reasonable person may question the integrity of the agency's programs and operations. Bit of a snoozer, but there it is. The regulation goes on to provide that several specific factors may be taken into consideration, including 1. The nature of the relationship involved, 2. The effect that resolution of the matter would have upon the financial interests of the person involved in the relationship, 3. The nature and importance of the employee's role in the matter, including the extent to which the employee is called upon to exercise discretion in the matter, 4. The sensitivity of the matter, 5. The difficulty of reassigning the matter to another employee, and 6. Adjustments that may be made in the employee's duties that would reduce or eliminate the likelihood that a reasonable person would question the employee's impartiality. Pretty hefty, but okay. Whitaker consulted with an unspecified number of, quote, senior, unquote, DOJ ethics officials. Those officials advised him, apparently without dissent, that Whitaker should recuse himself from the Russia investigation because, in their view, a reasonable person with knowledge of the relevant facts would likely question Whitaker's impartiality. We have done so. We all have. Everyone has wondered, right? Well, Whitaker did not take their advice. Why not? As far as we can tell from the letter's explanation, Whitaker concluded that he would, in fact, be impartial. That's it for me. I'm done, right? He's concluded, yeah, I'd be impartial. The letter also implies, without saying so directly, a judgment by Whitaker that a reasonable person shouldn't question his impartiality, mostly because of all the positive and appropriate statements he's made about Mueller since he stopped making the inappropriate comments 16 months ago. I think most observers will agree with the senior DOJ ethics officials rather than Whitaker on whether a reasonable informed person would question his impartiality. But let's give him the benefit of the doubt on that, I guess for the sake of argument. I don't really know why Marty wants to do it, but I'm guessing that's the reason. Let's assume for the sake of argument, that is, that Whitaker is genuinely committed to being impartial, and that although there is certainly concern that a reasonable person may question the integrity of the agency's programs and operations, it's nonetheless fair for Whitaker to conclude that a reasonable observer would, or at least should, credit his commitment to impartiality. Okay, now let's proceed with the remainder of the Section 2635.502D assessment. Wait a sec. It's not there. The letter simply stops at that point, as if that were enough. Notice what is conspicuously missing. There is, and I don't know if anybody can notice it, but we'll let Marty notice it for us here. There is no mention at all of what the government's interest might be in Whitaker's participation in the Russia investigation, let alone any discussion of why that interest might possibly outweigh the concern that a reasonable person may question the integrity of the agency's programs and operations. And in particular, the letter does not suggest that Whitaker so much as considered the importance of his own role in the matter or the difficulty of reassigning the matter to another employee. That is to say, the letter offers absolutely no reason why it would be of any value to the department or the administration of justice. Indeed, why it would be of any value to anyone or anything at all, save the personal interests of Donald Trump, for Whitaker to replace Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein as the superintendent of the Russia investigation. You know, he didn't finish the work, essentially. He was asked to justify his non-recusal based on, essentially, a list of 5 factors or so, and he discussed 2 of them and he left the last 3 out, or maybe it was 3 and left the last 2 out. Oh, I'm sorry. And there were 6, by the way. Nature of the relationship involved, effect of the resolution of the matter would have on financial interests of the person, nature and importance of the employee's role in the matter, sensitivity, difficulty of reassigning, adjustments that may be made to the employee's duties, etc., that might eliminate the likelihood of questions about impartiality. And there were 6 of them, and he only addressed a few of them, which is incomplete work and not good. And you might wonder why it was left incomplete. Now, there's a footnote here for the last sentence that we read from the piece, which was the letter offers no reason why it would be of any value to the department or the administration of justice in general. Indeed, no discussion of why it would be of value to anyone or anything at all except for Donald Trump, for Whitaker to replace Rod Rosenstein as superintendent of the Russia investigation. The footnote at the bottom here reads, the letter does mention Whitaker's desire not to create a precedent that recusal is required in all close call situations. That doesn't make much sense when you think about any of it. Of course, recusal isn't required in every close case. Indeed, the whole point of something being a close call situation is that sometimes the answer will fall on one side of the line and sometimes the other. In any event, if Whitaker were truly concerned about creating a precedent about whether recusal is required in all close cases, he could simply announce that although recusal isn't required in every close case, he's recusing here because there's no value in having Whitaker supersede Rosenstein in the Russia investigation. And that's an important point, and probably the most important one that he ignores in the letter. Now, he continues, Marty Lederman continues with his article, I hardly need to canvass the reasons why Rosenstein is obviously the more appropriate and effective official for the job. He's much more experienced and seasoned than Whitaker, especially in matters of complex criminal and counterintelligence investigations. He's been supervising Mueller for almost 2 years now and knows everything there is to know about the investigation. The working relationship between Mueller and Rosenstein has, by all reports, been excellent. Rosenstein hasn't made disparaging and legally inaccurate remarks about the investigation the way Whitaker has, etc., etc. The list could expand indefinitely. Oh, and there's this, too. Congress actually provided by law that in the case of a vacancy in the office of the Attorney General, the Deputy AG would perform the AG's functions automatically. And the Senate thus confirmed Rod Rosenstein to be Deputy Attorney General with the understanding and expectation that he'd perform those AG functions when the office is vacant or the AG is unable to do so, including because of recusal. Indeed, on November 7th, when Jeff Sessions resigned from office, Rod Rosenstein actually became the acting Attorney General as a matter of law and fact. Donald Trump did not purport to displace him with Matthew Whitaker until the next day, and then he did so without providing any legitimate reason, because there wasn't any, why he should deviate from the statutory and historical norm by displacing the statutorily designated acting officer. And that whole thing has been has fallen by the wayside in discussion since then, except here on the show where we continue to refer to Whitaker as the purported acting Attorney General. He's not. That creates 2 further clouds, Marty continues, that are reason enough for Whitaker himself to choose not to displace Rosenstein in the Russia investigation. 1, that a reasonable observer would obviously conclude that Trump deviated wildly from statutory and historical norms in order to insert in the AG's office someone he expected would be more loyal to him than Rod Rosenstein, and 2, that the legality of Whitaker's designation as acting, quote-unquote, acting AG is now subject to serious legal challenge. For all these many reasons, there'd be no, quote, difficulty of reassigning the matter to another employee at all. Indeed, no reassignment would be necessary because Rosenstein is already doing the job. The reassignment that's necessary is to bring in Whitaker at this point. And the importance of Whitaker's role in the matter is, of course, non-existent. From all that appears, Whitaker did not consider these things at all. And more importantly, he appears not to have ever made an assessment, as the regulation requires, whether any government interest in Whitaker's participation in the Russia investigation outweighs the concern that a reasonable person may question the integrity of the agency's programs and operations. If he had done so, there can hardly be any doubt what the proper answer would be. And in case you were unable to follow all of that, I mean, it was very dense. The obvious proper answer would be, there's none. There's no argument in the world that can possibly be made. Honestly, none that could possibly plausibly be made. And you know it doesn't matter plausibility with these guys. That Matthew Whitaker, the purveyor of the toilets for the well-endowed, and the fake patent firm lawyer who was brought in to threaten people who had been defrauded by the company that demanded that they get continuing payments in order to promote people's inventions. All this garbage. I mean, his prior experience is, if you want to be kind, not relevant to the Russia investigation. It's, one of the more amazing things about his rise to power, I mean, I guess besides his stupid background, which, you know, anybody could come from a background like that, I guess. It's, you know, whatever. But the idea that he specifically went to Washington, D.C. with the idea in mind that he would get himself on television talking smack about the Mueller investigation so that he would gain Trump's confidence and Trump would appoint him, I mean, that's pretty amazing. But besides all of that, the guy's got literally no experience at this level of government, no experience with the Russia investigation, no experience running anything but a backwater office of the U.S. Attorney's Office. There's literally no reason in the world why the government would have an overwhelming interest in Matthew Whitaker himself running or overseeing this investigation, and no one can even make one up. And that's a huge part of the formula. They just left it out. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. And so, I mean, that pretty much sums it up. I guess we're kind of done with the driest of the dry legal stuff. And I hope it made sense. This is a little dense, and you might have to, I had to stop and parse it a little bit in my first read through of all this. But yeah, basically what it comes down to, that bit about there needing to be a compelling government reason, a compelling government interest in having the person that you're going to allow to not recuse stay in this position or enter into this position. In other words, if you have the world's foremost expert in XYZ, the question would be, should we allow them to continue this work, even though there's a perception on the part of a reasonable person that the integrity of the proceedings of the work here would be compromised by potential conflicts. If you can make the argument that there's just nobody else, or that there's nobody better available at the moment, or this is a person who, for whatever reason, has got the expertise necessary to do this thing, and it would also be a huge burden for the department to transfer that work to someone else, then if all of that together combined can arguably outweigh the problem that still exists, that other people outside, reasonable people outside of the department or anywhere for that matter, would think, there's no way this guy can be impartial. Then you could try and make the excuse. But Whitaker brings nothing to the job with him. I can see why they'd leave this part out. I mean, it's extraordinarily embarrassing. But when I say I could see why they'd leave it out, the normal person thrust into this job might decide to leave it out because it would be so obviously disqualifying. Now, the problem is that, I mean, the idea is foreign to good and decent lawyers, essentially. I mean, there's the canon of ethics that requires you to at least cite and then hopefully refute contrary authority. There's a huge stumbling block in the way of his deciding not to recuse himself, and it's sitting out there right in the middle of the rules, regulations, laws, etc., governing the situation, and he just ignores it. And I mean, you get sanctioned by the court for doing that. So you can't really move into the position of attorney general or acting attorney general, as he purports to be, with, on the basis of having ignored an enormous contrary authority, simply because it would be horrifically embarrassing and disqualifying to you. Ignoring it is horrifically embarrassing and disqualifying all by itself. Never mind the fact that the substance of the regulation that you're ignoring is itself clear that you're unqualified and ought to be disqualified from any exemption from recusal. How's that? Does that make any sense? Okay. I think from there, we can possibly move on. All right. Well, there is considerably more that we could do to explore the inner workings of the Department of Justice and the other things swirling around the Russia investigation. And we will, I'm sure, and whether or not we get to any more of these pre-recorded podcasts or not, I'm not sure. This is a busy week, but eventually we'll be back on that subject. There's no doubt about that. Let's take some time to switch gears and pick up on something that has been looming out there that we haven't touched on, that I've been asked to touch on, and it's been bothering me because we haven't. I got this tweet from Blakely Wall. There's an underscore in between Blakely and Wall if you'd like to follow along and find this tweet. And, well, I thought, why not? It was a straight-up request. Will you read this to us? Kagro X, will you read this to us? Hashtag KITM. How can you resist just being flat-out asked about this? Something that we've made only the briefest mention of and has been puzzling to me. So let's dive in. The request is for this piece from BuzzFeed News about the situation in France, about which I am almost utterly ignorant, so it serves us both to read this. I think the Yellow Vest riots in France are what happens when Facebook gets involved with local news. This is interesting because I have two opposite takes on the riots. One, I am more inclined to trust, and that would perhaps be this BuzzFeed News piece that a listener has referred us to. The other is terrible because it comes from the Federalist. I haven't actually read it, but I noted. I don't know if we're going to read it or not, but because we've already discussed the Federalist being horrible and used them on this podcast, I'll just note for the record, there's two Federalist pieces in pocket. One is the terrible one we read. The other is one that's entitled something like "Why that the riots in France illustrate precisely why we need the Electoral College in the United States." I'm afraid to read that one, but I just want to note for the record that it's out there. But increasingly, my interest in this is that increasingly I'm seeing people referring to the situation in France to make some point about what's going on in the United States and everywhere, and I'm beginning to feel like we're missing something if we're not clued into this. I don't know if this is going to clarify or not, but the point is a request was made, and I have an itch to scratch on the France subject here. The Yellow Vests movement, our subtitle here says, is what happens when you point Facebook's traffic hose at France's small towns. The question now is, how do you turn it off? I don't even understand the question. Ryan Broderick and Jules Darmanin, writing for BuzzFeed on this one. This was posted on December 5th, updated a day later. So it's getting on a month old already, but we need to catch up on this situation, and I owe this reading. So here we go. This week, It wasn't, of course. Protesters scaled the Arc de Triomphe. Oh, no, I forgot. I'm going to be reading about France, which means plenty of French pronunciation, of which skill I have none. They scaled the Arc. They burned cars, clashed with police in the third consecutive weekend of riots in France. More than 300 people were arrested in Paris last weekend alone. Again, beginning of December, and 37,000 law enforcement officers have been deployed around the country to restore order. Oh my goodness. Well, the yellow vests, or this is it in French, I guess. How would they say this? Gilets jaunes? I have no idea. Gilets jaunes? The yellow vests. I took zero French. I'm embarrassed. All right. The protests have gotten only more violent since they began last month, so that would be November. 3 people have died, hundreds more have been injured. To hear the protesters tell it, they're marching through the streets to fight back against rising fuel prices and the high cost of living in the country. Like in the country, in the countryside of France, or in France at all, I'm not certain. Beyond that, though, it's an ideological free-for-all. Fights have also been witnessed among demonstrators, and some have sent death threats to other protesters. But what's happening right now in France isn't happening in a vacuum. The Yellow Vests movement, named for the protesters' brightly colored safety vests, is a beast born entirely from Facebook, almost entirely from Facebook. And it's only getting more popular. Recent polls indicate the majority of France now supports the protesters. The Yellow Vests communicate almost entirely on small, decentralized Facebook pages. They coordinate via memes and viral videos. Whatever gets shared the most becomes part of their platform. Interesting. I mean, we know that that's how Facebook works, but I mean, for a political movement to say, well, whatever gets shared a lot, we'll just incorporate. I mean, essentially, that's just a proxy for the way platforms are normally formulated, but it's just interesting that they would do it that way online, depending on the algorithm. Due to the way algorithm changes made earlier this year interacted with the fierce devotion in France to local and regional identity, the country is now facing some of the worst riots in many years, and in Paris, the worst in half a century. This isn't the first time real-life violence has followed a viral Facebook storm, and it certainly won't be the last. Much has already been written about the anti-Muslim Facebook riots in Myanmar and Sri Lanka, and the WhatsApp lynchings in Brazil and India. Well, the same process is happening in Europe now on a massive scale. Here's how Facebook tore France apart. In January of this year, anger groups, and here we have some more French, groupes, how they say this, colère. I'm mangling this. I'm going to stop with the French, I think. Anger groups started to appear across French Facebook. The first group was titled, "Are You Fed Up? This is now." And I don't know what that's supposed to mean, but in parentheses, anger plus DEPT, like department. I don't know what that's supposed to mean. And anyway, it doesn't matter because it was started by a Portuguese bricklayer, in French, I guess, named Leandro Antonio Nogueira, who was living in the southwest, department, or département, I don't know, how would you say it? Who cares? Or administrative territory of Dordogne. Imagining I'm pronouncing that correctly. No, I'm not. Nogueira's group, I'm more confident in my Portuguese, which I also don't speak, called for members to peacefully protest local authorities by blocking roads. Nogueira then quickly helped set up anger groups in other départements across France. These immediately gave lower middle class and working class people in small towns a chance to complain about local issues. Nogueira's first group, which is private, currently has around 90,000 members. These pages weren't exploding in popularity by coincidence. The same month that Nogueira set up his first group, Mark Zuckerberg announced 2 algorithm changes to Facebook's news feed. that would, quote, prioritize news that is trustworthy, informative, and local, unquote. The updates were meant to combat sensationalism, misinformation, and political polarization by emphasizing local networks over publisher pages. One change upranks news from local publishers only. Another change made the same month prioritizes posts from friends and family, hoping to inspire back and forth discussion in the comments of posts. In groups, people often interact around public content. Adam Mosseri, the head of Newsfeed at the time, explained in a subsequent blog post. Pages whose posts prompt conversations between friends will see lessen of effect. We have doubled down on our efforts to prevent the spread of false information on our platform and to educate people on how to identify and signal this type of content, a Facebook spokesperson told BuzzFeed News. We also have robust partnerships. Oh boy, at least they're robust. That's such a buzzword. With French fact-checking organizations to tackle misinformation by verifying information shared on our platform. Facebook, by all indication, plans to continue emphasizing local content. It announced plans this month to expand the feature to create local news hubs in 400 test cities in the U.S. So, Facebook tweaked its algorithm, and local anger groups spread across French Facebook at a shocking speed. The groups were able to organize a dozen or so decent-sized protests last winter. French départements are numbered, so between January and February, demonstrations with names like Anger 24 or Anger 87 would pop up, shut down roads, and protest things like labor law reforms, reducing the speed limits on busy roads, or proposed local vaccination plans. France's anti-vax movement is particularly nasty at the moment, and anger groups were, and still are, a hotbed of anti-vax misinformation. Okay, so having checked a little bit on the pronunciation of département, do you like that better? Département. Should I just do it as English? Department. Département numbers are displayed on car license plates. They play a significant role in the identity of most French people, as well as how they use Facebook. When French Facebook users, especially older ones, want to share something with their local community, they often will write PTG, which is short for sharing. I'll take your word for it. Followed by the 2 or 3 digit number of their département. By the spring, the protest movement had more or less died down, but on May 29th, a 32-year-old woman from the Paris suburb of, Seine-et-Marne. Seine-et-Marne, how's that? Named Priscilla Ludowski, super French, that is, went on change.org and created a petition titled, should I even bother? The English translation being, for a drop in the fuel prices at the pump. They're really proud of themselves of their French, I guess, over at BuzzFeed. For a drop in the fuel prices at the pump. That's the name of the petition. BuzzFeed News has reached out to Ludowski for comment. They want to speak French with her. Ludowski, an entrepreneur who currently sells organic cosmetics and aromatherapy advice online. Why do I get up in the morning? Told Le Parisien that she started the petition after she Googled fuel taxes and was scandalized at how high they are. Interesting. Her petition didn't immediately go viral, though. She received only a few hundred signatures at first. According to Ludowski's Facebook page, she spent the summer on Facebook sharing links to various aromatherapy products and promoting her Change.org petition. All the while, gas prices in France were getting worse, but things didn't really pick up steam until this October. Okay, on October 10th, Ludowski wrote on her Facebook page that a local radio station agreed to have her on one of its shows if her petition could pass 1,500 signatures. A day later, she wrote that she'd be appearing on the show the next day. The radio segment was then written up by a small local news page for Seine-et-Marne and shared to a Seine-et-Marne Facebook page with about 50,000 subscribers. That appears to be when all hell broke loose. The article got about 500 shares off the local Facebook page and a lot of local engagement. The same day that Ludowski went on the radio, a second petition against fuel taxes was posted to the French-language crowdsourcing site Mes Opinions. Titled, again, more French. Here's the actual English translation. For a fuel price capped at €1 per liter. The Mes Opinions, who knows how it's pronounced, Mes Opinions, my opinions, petition went viral fast. According to an analysis by social media intelligence tool BuzzSumo. Why do I even bother with this junk? BuzzSumo? Really? Okay. This one received 160,000 engagements off the Mes Opinions Facebook page alone. There was also a Facebook event created on October 12th by two truck drivers, Eric Drouet and Bruno Lefebvre. Gosh, France, do it again. From the same Paris suburb as Ludowski. The same one that I couldn't pronounce before, so I don't have to try a new one. The event was called National Blockage Against Rising Fuel. They didn't even bother giving it in French this time. And was scheduled for November 17th. We talked one night on the phone and... Oh, this is the quote from the truck drivers. We talked one night on the phone, and we said we were tired of paying taxes and seeing the price of fuel increase. Well, gee whiz. Anyway, this is what Lefebvre told the French newspaper Libération. Libération. I don't know how they say it. Who cares? And that's not who cares. It's I'm frustrated with not knowing. On October 15th, a group was started called Stop the Fuel at the Price of Gold. This is these translations. I'm not so sure these guys know French any better than I do, but that's the translation. Again, they've now stopped giving the French name because it's worthless to me, but I mean, I guess it's worthless to them to keep continuing to give it. So they're giving the translations. Stop the fuel at the price of gold. Okay. Stop very expensive fuel. And it shared the Mes Opinions petition. The page has since changed its name to France in Anger and received 17.3 million total interactions since October, according to another social media intelligence tool, CrowdTangle. Why they keep switching tools, I'm not sure. All 10 of the currently most popular public anger groups, according to CrowdTangle, were started in the same week that Ludowski went on the radio and the second the petition went viral. On October 22nd, Le Parisien wrote up Ludowski's petition from May, at that point still hadn't actually received that much attention, especially compared to the Facebook traffic the Mes Opinions petition was receiving at the time. But after the Le Parisien article, Ludowski's petition finally jumped from 10,000 signatures to 225,000. The article itself also went viral. In a subsequent piece on October 24th, Le Parisien bragged that Ludowski's original petition didn't get any attention until it was written up by the paper 2 days earlier. So, in less than 2 weeks, what you end up with is this. A Change.org petition with fewer than 1,500 subscribers gets talked about on a local radio station. The radio appearance is written up by a local news site. The article is shared to a local Facebook page. Thanks to an algorithm change that is now emphasizing local discussion, the article dominates the conversation in a small town. Two men from the same suburb then turn the petition into a Facebook event. A duplicate petition goes viral within the local Facebook groups. Then a daily newspaper writes up the original petition. This second article about the petition goes viral. So does the original petition. And then the rest of French media follows. Ludowski's petition now has over 1 million signatures. Why couldn't they just explain it that way? That seems pretty good. Okay. Let's see. Continuing on here. Anger groups have always been huge hubs for fake news and general fringe internet nonsense. the newfound national attention is making things even worse. According to the About page for Citizens in Anger, its true goal is to defend France against a Masonic cabal of global bankers, hint, hint, who control France. It currently has 15,000 members. Among the first posts shared by France in Anger, one of the public groups with the most engagement right now, is a post that, according to Snopes, has been bouncing around the internet since at least 2017 and claims 1 million Germans abandoned their cars and walked through the streets to protest increased fuel prices. They didn't, and the accompanying photo is most likely of a 2010 traffic jam in China. And okay, if you can't tell the difference between 1 million Germans and 1 million Chinese, I don't know what to tell you. I don't know what the photo looks like. But I guess we could look over at Snopes. Now I'm curious. It's a traffic jam in China. Does the photograph show Germans protesting high fuel prices? The faces, you're just not close enough. Although, quite honestly, I guess given what we know now, the cars don't look like, any sort of protest that might take place in Germany. I think the cars, you'd perhaps see more German cars in such a protest. And there's not a blonde head among the people, but you can't get close up and you can't tell. But given that you now know it's China, you'd probably say, yeah, given the choice between it being in Germany or in China, you'd probably choose China. But just told it was Germany, sure, I could see how that would fool people. Why not? Okay, another rumor reportedly spread by a French YouTuber, and YouTubers, the bane of my existence as well, but mostly listening to my kids talk about their favorite YouTubers. A rumor reportedly spread by a French YouTuber claimed that the National Police were going to march on November 17th with the Yellow Vests. Before the same protests, Yellow Vests Facebook groups were filled with pictures of a fake letter from the, and it's a famous place, the French equivalent of the White House, the President's Palace, I guess, Élysée Palace, Élysée Palace. I don't know how it's pronounced. And that's something that I should know regardless of not knowing French, but I don't. We'll check that one out. All right, so we'll go with Élysée Palace on that. That's my best attempt at it. Okay, so it's filled with pictures of a fake letter from the Élysée Palace, France's equivalent of the White House. In the letter, President Emmanuel Macron asks the Paris prosecutor to, quote, use force against protesters. Not only was it obviously fake, it was filled with typos. Because the Yellow Vests have no real leader or coherent political stance beyond viral anger, most of the structure of the movement is being decided by whichever video spreads far enough to make an impact. Oh, okay, so it's not an official formula for it. Just whatever happens, happens. One of the movement's leading vloggers, yes, it says that with a V, is a 51-year-old chemtrail truther from Brittany named Jacqueline Mouraud, perhaps, Mouraud. Even the now iconic safety vest that the protesters are all wearing comes from a viral Facebook video. Ghislaine Courtard, a 36-year-old from Narbonne in the South Coast, posted a video on October 24th urging protesters to wear the yellow vest, an item all French motorists are required to have in their cars. Interesting. I was wondering sort of where they had come up with these things. If only we could do what we did for the World Cup in 1998, interesting, and 2018, but for oil, for taxation, for everything, Courtard says in the video, referring to France's victory in the 1998 World Cup on home soil. We all have a yellow jacket in the car. Display it on the dashboard all week until the 17th. A simple color code to show that you agree with us. Interesting. Okay, so that's where it starts. Spontaneously during the video, I said to myself, it is something that we see well from a distance. It could be the color code of this protest movement, Coutard told France Info. His video has 5.4 million views and over 200,000 shares. Okay, so that's where the vest comes from. Maxime Nicole, one of 8 people who now claim to be spokespersons for the movement, is a prolific sharer of conspiracy theories. Nicole, who is known as Fly Rider, was recorded saying that a man, who asked to remain anonymous, had recently made him sign a non-disclosure agreement before giving him confidential documents. Sounds suspicious. I don't know about that one. We'll see more about it after this. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, with a brand new interruption, though it's still aimed at saying thank you to all of you who are supporters of the show. We've made a lot of progress. When we first started this campaign, fewer than 1 in 25 regular listeners were donating to help keep us on the air, and now that's down to about 1 in 15, but we've got a long way to go. Remember, it won't take much. Our average monthly donation is currently about $7, for which you're getting 2 hours of great news and entertainment 5 days a week. What's that, 70 cents an hour? That's a pretty good deal. But as a wage, well, I think Democrats would be against it. But if we all put our 70 cents together, or even half of us, that'd really be something. And my kids could go to college. Now, that's not all on you, but remember, patreon.com, Patreon.com, is there to make it easy. You can find us there by searching Kagro X, or David Waldman, or Kagro in the Morning, or even Daily Coast Radio in their search box, and you'll be right there where you need to be to make easy, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Once again, thanks so much for your continuing support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We left off reading this BuzzFeed news piece. The yellow vest riots in France are what happens when Facebook gets involved with local news. Let's see. Where we left off, we had just been introduced to yet another of the ostensible leaders, I suppose, of the yellow vest movement here, although except we've learned along the way there are no actual leaders. It's just whoever's viral video happens to take off at the moment. Maxime Nicole was the person we just heard about, saying this time the guy claiming as a prolific sharer of conspiracy theories, staying true to form. This guy known as Fly Rider was recorded saying that a man who had asked to remain anonymous had recently made him sign a non-disclosure agreement before giving him confidential documents. Okay. Now he goes on to say, I now know things that might lead people to try and kill me. If you only saw one sheet out of the 30 I've seen this evening, he said to a group of yellow vests, it would trigger a third world war in less than an hour. Sounds like something maybe you shouldn't trust. Nicole said in a Facebook live stream later in the night that if the name of the anonymous man was revealed, Macron would have a stroke. However, in the same video, Nicole then backtracked, saying that whatever secrets he knows, people should just keep protesting. Okay. Any kind of internet conspiracy theory you can imagine, there's probably a yellow jacket and an anger group spreading it, including the theory that Facebook is censoring every yellow vest's post. On French cable news, several yellow vests protesters said that the French Constitution was made null by a 2016 decree from then Prime Minister Manuel Valls. No idea of the pronunciation, of course, echoing a similar conspiracy theory popularized by a 70-year-old YouTuber named Serge Petitdemange, I'm guessing. According to the yellow vests who believe this, everything that happened in the French state after the first day of 2017 is meaningless and a new regime has to be founded, as was the case after the Second World War. A protester played the video during the November 24th protest, footage of which was, of course, posted to a yellow vest Facebook group where it was shared almost 10,000 times. This universe of wildly viral misinformation, feels like sovereign citizen stuff, has made the Yellow Vests a prime target for bad actors. A large page that shares Yellow Vest content is Anonymous France, a Facebook page with 1.2 million likes. It shares videos and memes, as well as links to blogs that all belong to the same shady online fake news network, Tu sais quoi? What do you know? That's my best attempt at pronouncing that one. The biggest Yellow Jacket group is Yellow Jacket now. We've moved over to Yellow Jacket instead of Yellow Vest. Is called Compteur Officiel de Gilets Jaunes. Gilets Jaunes. I don't know. The official Yellow Vests counter. It currently has 1.7 million members, according to its members page. It's impossible to post in the group, though all people do is add dozens of their friends at once. So all it does is, it's just a sign up your idiot friends page. That's all. Huh? You can't post anything. The page has spread through friend networks by appearing in the platform's sidebar, suggesting more people to add. Oh, fantastic. Okay. This viral free-for-all finally came to a head on November 17th when 300,000 Yellow Vests mobilized across France. By all accounts, it was a logistical disaster. One person died, 585 people were injured, another 115 policers is what it reads. Policers? Police people were hurt? Policers were hurt? I don't even know who's getting hurt here. And the military had to be deployed on the overseas French island of Réunion after looting and riots broke out. The violence has only gotten worse since then. Maybe it's good. The fewer people who speak French, the fewer are going to start rioting and creating disturbances. But unruly and violent or not, the movement is popular. 72% of the country currently supports it. Whatever it is, who knows? French unions are announcing their support, and they've now also forced President Macron into a corner. France's Prime Minister, we'd hear a lot less about, Edouard Philippe, I guess that's where the accent is, who knows, announced Tuesday that fuel tax increases would be suspended for 6 months as the country deals with the situation. Do I want lower gas prices? Sure. Whatever. French people, are you just rioting about nothing? Thomas Miral, a 25-year-old spokesperson for the Yellow Vests and the one who registered the Gilets Jaunes domain name, told BuzzFeed News that the movement has gotten too large. Wow, gee whiz. And he expects this weekend's violence to surpass previous protests. I think it will be a real disaster, he said. Miral has said he was drawn to the movement originally when he saw a petition and the Facebook event and thought it was a good way to organize people. Well, it wasn't. But between the violence and the fake news he's seeing, he's unsure what happens next. Also, Macron's backtracking on tax increases didn't comfort him much. They announced they were going to suspend taxes for 6 months. But what happens in 6 months? He said. There are no plans for the movement to go away. Who would plan that? There's talk of creating new legislation via a referendum. Take a quick scan of any Yellow Vests group. They aren't celebrating. If next weekend's protests, which have passed already, are as extreme as Miral fears they may be, it's unclear what Macron will do. He's already discussed the possibility of declaring a state of emergency. I guess we haven't gotten to that yet. But whatever does happen, you can bet that it'll all be breathlessly documented and memed and, of course, posted to your local anger group. Well, terrific. That sounds just great. Well, I don't know if I got a better understanding of what's going on there or not, but I got some news about it. I'm glad for that. I'm glad this was shared. Thanks, Blakely, for asking about that. There's more direction we can take on this, and I've put aside a few more articles. Maybe we can clarify, but I'm still genuinely curious about what exactly, how could they get to 72% support without being for anything in particular? I guess as a protest of high gas prices, yeah, you're going to get 72% support about that. Sure, why not? Would I rather prices be lower? Yeah, I'm on board. Thanks a lot. Okay, well, I would say I am no closer to understanding exactly what's going on in France than I was before. Well, okay, I'm a little bit closer, but I don't know if I was ever going to grasp what's going on in France. I've been curious about it because I have seen Donald Trump raving about it from time to time on Twitter that Paris and France as a whole are on fire with riots, and he's usually claiming it's because of whatever it is he needs to attack, whether it's globalism in general, immigration as an issue, who knows what. But he's generally bringing up the riots in France as somehow proof of the rightness of his agenda. I have a lot of doubts about whether that has any basis in reality. Of course, there was, for a while, the rumor circulating that the rioters in France were chanting, "We want Trump." And it turned out that that was, in fact, video of people in England, for some reason, chanting, "We want Trump." And I don't understand that any better than anything else, except that, ordinarily, I would imagine that those with nationalist impulses in France would not likely be chanting in English, but perhaps they would be to troll everybody. I have no idea. Anyway, between that and on the other end of the spectrum, people like Matt Stoller holding up the issue in a slightly more interesting light and making his points about internationalism and globalism. It's been a weird confluence, I guess, of discussion points on what's going on in France. So I thought it might be of some interest to at least put on the record what the hell's going on there and some sort of glimpse as to how this could have happened, what it might mean. I come away with no meaning whatsoever, to be honest, but I don't know. I think I understand it just slightly better, having learned that it is now largely being driven by conspiracy theorists on Facebook. Anyway, to change gears entirely, just one more thing I wanted to throw at you, and why not wrap up with something a little less political, but still of interest to me, and so therefore I hope to you. Here's a weird curveball from The Atlantic. Taylor Lorenz has this article from December 18th. Rising Instagram stars, and I always wonder how this is happening. Rising Instagram stars are posting fake sponsored content. Why would this happen? It's instant street cred, is the grab quote here. The more sponsors you have, the more credibility you have. So why not just fake your credibility? Because you're not supposed to do that. This is another one of those why do I get out of bed in the morning stories. It's disturbing enough that people were making significant amounts of money, making livings, being Instagram stars at all. I mean, I don't understand Instagram really as an attractive platform, but visual content is always, I guess, more desirable than written content. The idea that I would, want to look at what somebody who spends their life shopping is shopping for now has always been a puzzle to me. Instagram just doesn't appeal to me, and to many people it does, and I guess this is a thing. Also interesting was I happened to catch wind of this story from another Atlantic writer tweeting about it, Derek Thompson, who I don't think it'll ruin the story terribly to say his tweet. I'm obsessed, he says, with the bizarre implications of speed running the rules of the attention economy. And this is an amazing example. And he includes a link to this article. He goes on to say, devoting your life to making pretty ads for brands you don't even use for free sounds so ludicrous Neil Postman would blush. But for influencers, sponsored posts are signals to other companies that they're desirable. So it weirdly makes total sense to become a fake advertiser. And he concludes his part of it by saying, when you think about how many would-be actors are realizing, I guess these days, that it's easier to make money online than on stage, it's not too cheeky to suggest that fake SponCon, sponsored content, is practically the new off-Broadway, the wise, necessary stepping stone to merchandising a telegenic smile. Very broad thought there. And interesting interaction thereafter between another user here, Alan Cole, business economics and public policy, Wharton. I guess, I don't know, does he teach there? Tax policy guy, high priest emeritus. It goes on. But it's very interesting. I mean, and he brings it into the economic realm, saying, this is amazing. Also a sign that wages for the median would-be influencer are being driven down to basically zero. In fact, we're literally observing a zero wage here. Kylie Jenner and such make all the real money. So all very interesting. And Derek answers, speaking of the writer of the piece, we should ask Taylor Lorenz what's common here, because I just don't know. I wouldn't be surprised if the wage scale is very exponential. On the other hand, I could build an argument that the social costs of being caught doing fake SpawnCon are high, but justified by the high rewards of breaking through. It's all very interesting. But let's get on to the piece itself from Taylor Lorenz. Rising Instagram stars posting fake sponsored content. Another amazing step into the disastrous future, I guess. Tapping through Palak Joshi's Instagram stories recently. I was not doing that. You might have come across a photo, that looked like standard sponsored content. A shiny white box emblazoned with the red logo for the Chinese phone manufacturer OnePlus and the number 6, shot from above on a concrete background. It featured the branded hashtag tied to the phone's launch and tagged OnePlus's Instagram handle. And it looked similar to posts from the company itself announcing the launch of its new Android phone. Joshi's post, however, wasn't an ad. It looked sponsored, but it's not, she said. I have no idea who this person is. But Palak, by the way, P-A-L-A-K, Joshi, J-O-S-H-I. I have no idea how well I'm doing with pronouncing it, but there you go. Look her up if you like. Joshi's post wasn't an ad. It looked sponsored, but it's not, she said. Her followers are none the wiser. They just assume everything is sponsored when it really isn't, she said, and she wants it that way, which is the opposite from the way you used to think people would want things taken. A decade ago, shilling products to your fans may have been seen as selling out. Now it's a sign of success. People know how much influencers charge now, and that payday is nothing to shake a stick at. You shake a stick at that? I don't know that that's something you shake sticks at. It's nothing to turn your nose up at, but people are mixing metaphors in weird ways these days. I'm not positive about the shake a stick thing. That, though, comes from Alyssa Vingan-Klein, the editor-in-chief of Fashionista, a fashion news website. If someone who is 20 years old watching YouTube or Instagram sees these people traveling with brands, promoting brands, I don't see why they wouldn't do everything they could to get in on that. But transitioning from an average Instagram or YouTube user to a professional influencer, that is, someone who leverages a social media following to influence others and make money, is not easy. After archiving old photos, redefining your aesthetic, and growing your follower base to at least the quadruple digits, you'll want to approach brands. But the hardest deal to land is your first, several influencers say. Companies want to see your promotional abilities and past campaign work. So many have adopted a new strategy. Fake it until you make it. Sydney Pugh, a lifestyle influencer in Los Angeles, recently staged a fake ad for a local cafe, purchasing her own mug of coffee, photographing it, and adding a promotional caption carefully written in that particular style of ad speak anyone who spends a lot of time on Instagram will instantly recognize. I don't know, I added the instantly because of Instagram, I think. Instead of captioning, I need coffee to get through the day, mine will say, I love Alfred's coffee because of ABC, Pugh told me. You see the same things over and over on actual sponsored posts, so it becomes really easy to emulate even if you're not getting paid. I mean, even if you are, I don't see why it would be easy to emulate regardless of the pay, but okay. When a local amusement park paid several bloggers to attend the venue and post about their experience there, Joshi, a fashion and lifestyle influencer, went on her own dime and posted promotional posts as if she were part of the bigger influencer campaign. Taylor Evans, took the fake SpawnCon game one step further, once faking the entire purpose of a trip to Miami. Technically, she was just there on vacation, paying her own way for everything. I've always wondered about this. But on Instagram, she positioned it as an exclusive press trip. I took a lot of pics at restaurants and posted, "Thanks so much, XYZ restaurant, for the hospitality," she said. You say it in a way that people could interpret it as you having an established relationship with that brand. The hope is that it's perceived in a way that looks like there's a reason you're in a different city and state, not just enjoying a weekend vacation. Wow. And I wonder then if you can end up deducting the costs of going on your vacation because they're being used, for basically to try and drum up work. It's promotional costs for your brand of influencer-ness. You know what I mean? I wonder if you could get away with that. Do you think the IRS would let you get away with that? Maybe they would now. They're understaffed and they're stretched so thin. I'm sure if Donald Trump pulled something like that, they'd let him get away with it. That's a thought. Weird. Okay. Let's see. Jason Wong, the founder of the false eyelash company, Doux Lashes, D-O-U-X. Is that French again? Please. Said he's surprised at the levels to which aspiring influencers have gone to promote his brand for free. Normally, influencers did one post for one product, he said. Now we've seen influencers do 2 to 3 posts for one product. They want to have a continuous stream of content to make it seem like it's sponsored. Monica, oh my goodness, how do we pronounce this way? Ahanonu. Monica Ahanonu. That's probably a good shot at it. An illustrator, an Instagram influencer with nearly 12,000 followers. Is that a lot? I mean, can I do this? I have 41,000 Twitter followers. I mean, I guess I'd have to get on Instagram first to do it. But would I be able to amass as many, or is the universe there smaller? Is 12,000 a lot? An illustrator and Instagram influencer, Monica is, with nearly 12,000 followers. She says that fake ads have become so common that she's not even sure who is sponsored and who is pretending. Boy, they must love that. While the Federal Trade Commission, now they have a nightmare on their hands, recently ruled that paid advertisements must be disclosed, influencers regularly flout those guidelines. That's problematic and brings us to another subject of the impotence of the Federal Trade Commission. Probably should deal more with that, but this one's just real interesting. And there are no rules against people who aren't paid captioning their photos to make them sound like paid disclosures. How would you regulate that? Ahanonu herself posted an Instagram recently featuring custom artwork promoting a Chanel cosmetics kit. She didn't receive payment or any product in exchange, but her post would look right at home among other Chanel ads. And it's not too far off from what we used to do when I worked in advertising more regularly. Lots of spec ads. You do an ad for a brand you hope to land as a client to show them what you could do. Usually they don't run it, but if they wanted to, then they'd pay you for it, though. You'd get money eventually. For the average consumer, things become blurry quickly. Many fashion influencers tag the brands they're using in photos, whether the clothes were purchased, given to them for free, or are part of an ad campaign. Lifestyle blogging is all about seamlessly monetizing your good taste and consumer choices, which means it can be near impossible for lay people to tell if an influencer genuinely loves a product, is being paid to talk about it, or just wants to be paid to talk about it. I want to be paid to talk about it. That's me. I'm the last one. When Allie, a 15-year-old, why is this happening, lifestyle influencer who asked to be referred to by a pseudonym, scrolls through her Instagram feed, sometimes the whole thing seems like an ad. There's a fellow teen beauty influencer bragging about her sponsorship with Maybelline. A high school sophomore she knows touting his brand campaign with Voss water. Really? None of these promotions, however, is real. Allie is friends with the people posting, so she knows. She once faked the water sponsorship herself. People pretend to have brand deals to seem cool, Allie said. It's a thing. Like, I got this for free while all you losers are paying. It's fascinating. In the influencer world, it's street cred, said Brian Fanthau. I'm hoping I've pronounced that something close to correct. A 19-year-old lifestyle influencer in San Diego who sees fake ads all over Instagram. The more sponsors you have, the more credibility you have. Fanthau says most of the people he sees doing it grew up watching influencers, amazing also, and now aspire to their lifestyle. It's really common with kids in high school, he said. They're very influenced by influencers. At first, he was astounded that brands he recognized would partner with some of the people he saw on his feed, but when he cross-checked the brands' websites, he couldn't find their names. Henry, a 15-year-old beauty influencer who asked to be referred to by his first name only, beauty influencer. Okay, well, I guess good, interesting, crosses genders. Why not? He says he doesn't post fake ads himself, but said he noticed his social status rise as he got more attention online this year. People come up to me at school like, "Do you get sponsored?" he said. When I say I do, they're like, "OMG, that's so cool." I noticed the more followers I gain, the more people in the hall come up and talk to me. But of course, clout is just a means to an end, and ultimately, most of the people posting fake ads hope eventually to get paid to post real ones. Evans said staging these fake promotions makes you seem like you're in a position to be getting things for free, which helps you build your brand or media kit. It makes you seem more established, like you have brands that you're working with. That means you're producing good content and you're worthy of approaching and offering these opportunities to. So it's just faking a resume, but on Instagram. Interesting. After Samantha Leibowitz Bienstock, Bienstock, a lifestyle influencer who posts under the name Trendy Ambitious Blonde. Boy, oh boy. Posted a photo of herself with a Betsy Johnson bag she purchased with her own money and tagged the company. She was featured on its website. She wasn't paid, but she considered it a win for her personal brand. It's also a recycling of the write for the Huffington Post for free for the exposure, isn't it? But while some companies are thrilled with the free promotion, for others it's become a headache. The owner of one sunglasses brand, who asked to remain anonymous so as not to alienate anyone in the influencer community, look out, said the practice has put him in a tough position as a stream of mid-level influencers post mediocre quality sponsored content seemingly on his behalf without his approval or control. That is tough. I mean, screw you. Who cares what's happening to your sunglasses brand if you're even playing in the influencer market? But I see what you're getting at. He has seen influencers thanking his brand for, quote, working with them when he knew that they had never partnered. We do encourage our fans to put our stuff on Instagram. That's how we grow, he said. But he added that he was worried that some people appearing to be brand ambassadors could ultimately damage his business's reputation. And what if Richard Spencer decides to do it, right? Though he has considered it, he has never reached out to any of the influencers and asked them to take their post down. To him, that feels like even more of a risk. These people are looking for the most amount of attention, so if they want to make it seem like they've been wronged in any way by a brand, they will, he said. He's probably right there. And then there's the fact that fake SpawnCon misleads would-be partners. Wong was once a Tumblr star himself, amazing, and he knows the ins and outs of online marketing, but even he was recently duped. After hiring one influencer to promote his product, he later found out that all of her brand deals were fake. Now he cross-references all potential partners, calling up other brands they've claimed to work with to see if that work was paid. Seems like a minimal amount of work to ask people to do if you're going to operate in this space. But hey, who am I to talk? Okay, though it may seem like a useful tactic when you're starting out, more established influencers worry that fake SpawnCon is creating a race to the bottom. It is. Because brands can piggyback off waves of unpaid influencer promoters, some have ceased paying influencers completely, or now pay rates far below than what they previously spent. Now that's a strategy for me. Being driven crazy by this stuff, I might just consider the possibility of going out there to drive those wages down for the hell of it. I don't think people know they're screwing each other over. I would know, though. said CJ Upper Americano. How do you like that? A 22-year-old TikTok star. I don't even know what TikTok is. Wow, I'm too old for this. She has watched rates plummet as the industry becomes more saturated, and she recently lost out on a brand campaign to someone who offered to do it for a tenth of the price. People now treat brand deals like a verification badge, she said. How horrible. Vingan Klein said she can't blame the young fashion influencers she sees coming up today for their hustle. Trying to get sponsored is your way out of this rat race, she said. Teens today realize that you don't have to go up this hierarchy. You can skip the middleman, she added. Besides, what do the followers know? Ugh, that's an awful dismissal of your followers, but she's absolutely right. And that's was supposed to be the great promise of the internet, allowing you to skip one middleman or another. And I guess you're really disrupting things when you're skipping the middleman on the disruption plans. So disrupt the disruption, I say. I'm for that, I guess. It's a new hobby I could take up. Maybe that's how I'll spend the Christmas week. Anyway, we'll see if we can get back here with some more pre-recorded content for you. If not...
From Daily Co's Radio on networksradio.com.
Then you'll be on your own.
You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show.
With David Waldman.
And that's not necessarily the worst thing, and probably some of you, or if not all of you, are spending some time with family and maybe looking for some downtime. Anyway, we'll see how it goes. I'll bring some reruns with me. We may have to plug them in for Tuesday and Wednesday. Time's getting tight. If not, well, that'll be great. But if so, see you on Thursday, one way or another.